Thank you for the nice welcome. And I have to say, I see faces of patients who have welcomed me and trusted me to walk beside them on their journey. And I have to have you know that that means simply everything to me. So thank you so much. 11 years ago, November 2008, my dear friend, colleague, out proud lesbian mom and activist, Rebecca, invited me on behalf of her then 11-year-old daughter, Shoshana, to be Shoshi's adult male escort to the special holiday cotillion at the Wilshire Ebell in Hancock Park in Los Angeles, not having an adult handy of the opposite gender. And I like to think my background as a professional dancer sort of bumped me to the top of the list. How did I respond? I was over the moon on so many levels. I had attended cotillion myself in Long Beach, where I grew up in the 5th and 6th grades. 5th grade was square dancing and 6th grade was ballroom dancing. My mom didn't want to send me at first when my Aunt Gloria invited me to join my cousin Randy's school group. "Oh, you'll quit that just like you did the piano," she said. "Oh no, Mom, this is different. You'll see." Never quite like the other little children, this was the era of Vietnam and the Beatles and the Beach Boys. And I, on the other hand, lived to cha-cha. A chubby little waltzing anachronism. And it was quite the social liability, too. If anybody at my school found out that I went, or what's more, that I loved it, I might as well join the witness protection program, change schools then and there. You see, we live in all kinds of closets, don't we? Mine was a split level. How did I respond? I was so thrilled to have this opportunity to revisit this very sweet memory from my past. So Rebecca made a date for her and Shoshana to come over to our house, for Shoshi to give me the lowdown on what was expected of me, and to teach me the basic dance steps she had learned. First off, Michael, she says, "You got to wear a suit." Oh God, I don't have a suit. Becky assured me that a jacket and tie would be fine and that Shoshi wasn't yet well versed in the finer distinctions of menswear. So she proceeded to show me her basic waltz and foxtrot steps, and I told her, "Look, girl, I can teach you a routine. We can clear the floor here." Not realizing that wouldn't be tops on the agenda for an 11-year-old girl. So sadly, there would be no one-armed lifts at this particular cotillion. It's not about you, Michael. So the big day arrives. I race home from work, so excited, get showered, change into my jacket and tie, and I race over to the Wilshire Ebell. Within moments of even parking my car, I was slapped awake into another reality that had layers of meaning that were not all sweetness and light for me. There I was, feeling so conspicuously less than, in my light khakis and my olive shirt and my chocolate blazer. And I see these men pull up in these shiny BMWs and Mercedes. And they emerge in these sleek, beautifully tailored suits. Corporate and lawyer types I'd assumed rushing over from their offices in Century City or downtown, racing to meet their beautifully turned out wives and their lovely children to whom they'd given the best of everything. Successful, heterosexual. They had done life the right way. To put my feelings of being the outsider and inferior into a kind of context, I need to share that a few weeks earlier, I had found out in the most unceremonious way imaginable, I was to be laid off from my job at the time as a palliative care chaplain. A job that didn't pay enough to feed me as it was. And a week before that, the voters of California passed Proposition 8, enshrining into law that marriage in California would be defined only between a man and a woman, thereby nullifying all the legal same-sex marriages that had already taken place. And this was accomplished largely through the success of relentless television advertising that terrorized enough voters with the unthinkable prospect that the worst thing that could happen to your child would be that she finds out in school that I even existed. My mom says that if Prop 8 doesn't pass, that they're going to teach homosexuality in my school. I was not feeling on top of the world. Insiders and outsiders, here it was at the Wilshire Ebell. I remembered the dress code handed down to me some 40 years earlier. Same thing, suit or jacket and tie. And I didn't have a suit then either. My mom went to Unimart, the forerunner to stores like Target, and she bought me this shiny polyester wide wale corduroy olive green sport jacket with plastic buttons made to look like real leather. I hated it. especially the buttons. I knew then that it wouldn't pass muster with some of those Mormon boys at Cotillion who, like those lawyers, looked like they were born in their suits. But then I see the kids start to arrive. My God, the same prototypes to adolescence as 40 years earlier. There were those who looked so at ease and confident, eager to show off their new clothes and gossip with their friends and talk about holiday plans. And then there were those who, my God, they looked like they'd rather be going to their dog's funeral. One glorious contrast in 1964, however, was the sea of faces. The room looked like Los Angeles. There were Asian faces and Latino faces and African American faces. One of Thurgood Marshall's own great-grandnieces was there at a cotillion in Hancock Park in Los Angeles, a neighborhood in which several generations earlier he couldn't have purchased a home as an African American. And my friend Rebecca, out proud lesbian mom and her daughter. Things can change, you know? And then the dancing began. What fun. I especially loved watching some of the little boys who were a good 2 feet shorter than their partners. And they somehow had intuited that the sport of foxtrotting is all about who can take the biggest steps. And they're not quite sure why they're even playing music in the first place. But they're so damned earnest about it. And there I am dancing with Shoshana, feeling the oddest mix of pride and wonder, and I'm lost in this reverie of amazement and nostalgia and a feeling less than. And I look across the room and I see the most beautiful little Latino boy dressed in a jacket 2 sizes too big, dancing with his proud mom, who at 5 feet tall is still a good head taller than her boy, dressed in what I'm sure was her finest, a short-sleeved white knit top and navy blue pants. Right next to the most glamorous, elegant evening dresses, cocktail dresses, high heels, gloves. That was one multi-layered picture, I have to say, to this little gay mama's boy in the shiny corduroy jacket. Kind of exquisite, actually. Still, I was hopelessly short-sighted and not have foreseen what a minefield this sweet little cotillion could be. Insiders and outsiders. Hey, this is the world in which I felt the most at ease and confident at 11. And now, at 54, I'm somehow an outsider in my own universe? What's up with that? Can we be the insider and the outsider at the same time? And the whole intention of a cotillion is kind of a two-edged sword, isn't it? Teaching what? Manners, grace, civility, confidence, poise. For what? Well, so that we can go through life with manners and grace and civility and confidence and poise, and that's a good thing, right? But is there also buried in there an agenda to step up in class, to greater access to power, privilege, influence, all the while solidifying this heteronormative, gender-specific universe? Even Rebecca shared with me her hesitation at sending Shoshana in the first place. When she first heard white gloves for the little girls, to her, white gloves had historically meant no Jews allowed. Not to mention all the gender-specific stuff and the heteronormative stuff. Isn't it ironic that this is the realm in which I felt the most at ease as a gay 11-year-old boy, ballroom dancing with little girls in these prescribed roles? And just look at all the realms of insider-outsider status evident at this sweet little cotillion. There's race, class, gender, sexual orientation, religion. There's a big old Christmas tree in the middle of the ballroom. But we close the party with everyone dancing the hora in a big circle. What a relief, huh? There's danceability, even though too much danceability for a little boy is not exactly a status builder, let me tell you. And then there's the whole reason I was even invited in the first place. Family structures. Hell, I just wanted to go to a party. But this is so typical of what I do. Still, this whole experience of being the insider and the outsider, neither and both, moving between these worlds of apparent difference, has me reflecting on the parallels and the prevalence of this very same pattern in the world of cancer. Those who are inside, those who are out, those who get it and those who don't, those who belong and those that don't, in so many levels and so many dimensions. The old boundaries just don't seem to hold anymore. It's not at all unusual for me to hear patients say that they feel a greater sense of connection and kinship in their own cancer support community than they do sometimes in their own families or their own circle of friends. Perhaps the soul does select her own societies Emily Dickinson once said. And it all starts from the very outset. There's the realm of the newly diagnosed patient setting foot for the first time in a cancer infusion clinic, stepping into a new society, a new universe, and yet still belonging to this old one. And in this old one, everyone seems to be carrying on with their daily business as if nothing's changed, as if my world isn't upside down, as if that tsunami didn't happen. And yes, there are those in that world who are loving and attentive and concerned about my care, but they're also fretting and frightened and clinging to some kind of certainty, a certainty that often inspires them to make suggestions like, maybe if you just tried this herbal supplement I read about, maybe if you had this diet, maybe if you read this book, maybe there's this clinic in Mexico you should go to. I know if you said this prayer, or if you go to my brother-in-law's sister's uncle's healer, I'm just sure you will be better. As if I have the power and the wisdom to somehow rescue you from that universe and pull you back. Not realizing that such suggestions only build those walls higher and thicker. There's the realm of the patient living with metastatic disease, incurable, a world in which the most I can hope for is stability, more time living with chronic illness. And while maybe the ravages of my treatment have subsided for a time, my hair's grown back, color has returned to my cheek, I live in a world where nobody seems to understand this will be true for the rest of my life. I'm not going to get better. But you look so great. Everything okay? Everything better now? Well, hey, thanks for thinking I look good, but actually I'm scared out of my wits because my recent scans revealed that there was disease progression and I've been kicked off the drug trial that's been keeping me alive for the last 2 years. But hey, thanks for thinking I look good. Even our medical language can wound and isolate. Patient failed the drug trial, the chart might say. Failed the trial? No, the trial failed me. Pauline was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer right out of the gate. After the first regimen of chemo whipped her cancer into submission, her hair started to grow back, though she was plagued with pretty bad neuropathy. Pauline grew so weary of having to explain to everybody that no, it's not all over, and no, I'm not all better, that she decided to keep her head shaved. She wanted there to be some congruence between her outer presentation and her inner reality. I don't want to explain anymore. Pauline also wanted some of the perks that come with being a cancer patient. Yeah, Jack, get up, give me that seat. Can't you see I've got cancer? Then there's the realm of the survivor, the one given the all clear. Go, live your life, be well. How am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to live with the fear of recurrence that this is going to come back someday? How am I supposed to get all fired up to go back to work again? I don't even want to do that anymore. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't mean anything to me anymore. And look at my body. I can't do what I once did. And call me crazy, but I miss my whole treatment team. We were all in this together. They were fighting for me, and we were doing something. Now we're not doing anything at all. And then there's the realm of the bereaved, the one left behind, cancer having ripped their loved one from their side. And like the newly diagnosed patient, they live in a world where everyone is carrying on as if my world hasn't been shattered irreparably, forever. And like for the newly diagnosed patient, they live in a world where everybody has their idea about what you should do to get over it and how long it should take. It's been 6 months. Are you dating yet? I met this great guy. I think you might like him. I think your husband would want you to. As I reflect on that experience at the cotillion 11 years ago, and on the experiences of all these patients I've been privileged to walk beside, it has me thinking about that feeling of being an insider and an outsider, and where such feelings intersect with matters of faith. We don't have to look too far to see how many faith systems are built on the idea of us and them. We're inside, you're out. Defined by it, in fact. I like to think I'm beyond such divisions and I'm aiming for a world in which we're all insiders. Although that's all it is, it's an aim, it's a practice, it's certainly not a realized goal. And in talking spiritually, we can speak horizontally. That is, where do I see my connectedness, my connections, my sense of meaning to my place among things and people here in the physical world? But for many, that spiritual relationship is a vertical one between myself and higher power, God, the divine. And from what I observe, that vertical relationship is fraught with just as many struggles of insider-outsider status as if it were the dance floor at the Wilshire Ebell. In religious language, it might sound like, am I still within God's grace, or have I fallen from grace? Why haven't my prayers been answered? Have I done something wrong? Am I being punished? In secular language, the question might be, do I fit in? Do I belong? Am I enough? Do I have what it takes to do this? It's the same question. It's just a different context and a different vocabulary. Over my years of work as a chaplain, I have certainly seen my share of those who are quite certain of their insider status in that vertical relationship. Nearly 20 years ago now, when I began as an intern chaplain, I was assigned to liver transplants for a time, and I was making rounds one day and went in to introduce myself to Earl. Earl was, for this floor in particular, uncharacteristically chipper and bright-eyed. I introduced myself as the chaplain, and he welcomed me in right away and said, "Oh, yes, please, chaplain, please come in." I happened to be a Baptist pastor myself, and I would simply relish the opportunity to dialogue with fellow clergy. Oh, brother. So I pull up a chair and I sit down. "So tell me, Earl, what's going on?" "Well, chaplain, I couldn't be better. I was so sick I almost died. But you know what? The Lord blessed me with a new liver, and now I'm going to be just fine. You see, chaplain, prayer works, and the Lord blesses and keeps his own." Well, this just pissed me off. Earl and his theology. It wasn't very chaplain-like of me, I admit, but I just could not help myself. "Earl, I'm thrilled you get this second chance at life. And yes, these transplants are indeed a miracle. But I have to ask, Earl, what about the person who died and gave you that liver? Where do you suppose the blessing is in this for him or for her?" His smile flattened out a bit, perhaps forgetting for a moment that liver wasn't sent up from the pharmacy. I really couldn't say. I have no idea if that person was even saved or not. Ooh. It seems Earl's insider status with the Lord was inextricably linked to the outsider status of his poor, unfortunate donor. Walt, a cancer patient, was the quintessential self-described, self-made man. Rough and tumble beginnings, Irish Catholic, had grown to amass millions in the defense and oil industry, not a bit shy in telling me how many millions we were talking, and no moral struggle at all with how he made that money because, Michael, I simply used the gifts God gave me. That's all any of us has to do. It was as if in his mind, his financial success were proof of his favor with God. He had done it the right way, by himself and by the world and by God. He was the insider all the way. It was the American capitalist success story as theology. And like Earl, he had this perfect match between his outer world and circumstances and his inner beliefs or theology, as if one proved the other in some airtight kind of case. And it makes me wonder, can we even still call it faith when there's that kind of match, that kind of proof? In my mind, isn't faith more in the realm of, I don't know, holding the space for awe, for wonder, for mystery, hoping for that which is even perhaps beyond our articulation? I don't know. On the other side of that coin, I have certainly seen countless patients who do not understand why God has not answered their prayers, has not rescued them from horrific loss, suffering, maybe even death, why they are the spiritual outsiders, as it were, particularly when a faith system that held them up their entire lives told them something quite different. Gary presented the most confounding conflation of all these ideas. It was my very first unit of internship 20 years ago here at UCLA, and one of my first overnight on-call shifts at the hospital. A veritable grab bag of adventure, let me tell you, every time that pager went off, waking you from a not-so-sound sleep. Very late, one Sunday night, the pager went off and I was summoned to come up to Gary's room on the 10th floor of the old hospital across the street, hematology, oncology. Gary was scheduled to have a bone marrow transplant for the next day and was feeling quite distressed and anxious about it. The nurse thought he might benefit from a conversation with the chaplain. Gary was a devout evangelical fundamentalist Christian. And when he found out I was neither a fundamentalist nor a Christian, both of his hands went up in the air with this incredulous kind of disgust, as if I might be contagious or something. What? You're not a Christian? I can't talk to you. I've got nothing to say to you. We have nothing in common. What's with this hospital hiring a chaplain who isn't a Christian? Heaven help me if he knew I were gay. Ever the earnest chaplain, I hung in there for close to an hour, naively, or perhaps arrogantly, thinking I could tease apart his resistance to having a conversation with me. The guy was suffering. He was so angry, distressed, sad, and I was it for someone to talk to. Well, the thing is, Michael, I was told to have this transplant 6 months ago, and I told the doctors no. I said the Lord is going to heal me, and when he does, I'm going to come back here and tell you I told you so. And if he doesn't, in 6 months' time, I'll come back and I'll have the transplant, and you can tell me I told you so, but I'm going to stand on my faith. So here we are, it's 6 months later, and my transplant is tomorrow. Despite his antipathy for me, I felt this compassionate kind of affinity for Gary. Several times in my life, I've taken reckless leaps of faith that have flown in the face of conventional wisdom and have not turned out the way I would have hoped. Several times, my faith has collapsed completely, and I've had to reorient myself and rebuild. I do know what it's like to put all of your eggs in one basket and to drop the basket. I thought that perhaps on that page, Gary and I could meet. So Gary, when the Lord chose not to heal you, after all, did you feel what? Abandoned or betrayed or angry? I've never felt any of those things. Why would I? The fact is, my faith wasn't strong enough to have been healed, so the Lord had this in mind for me, gesturing to the tubes and pumps and hoses. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. That's the Lord's business, and I'll find out when I get to heaven. I wasn't buying any of it. The guy was so angry and sad and scared. But it had been close to an hour. I had given all I had to give. But I did think that we had perhaps opened the door just the littlest bit between us. And so I said, Gary, before I go, would you maybe like to say a prayer or blessing together before the big day tomorrow? Again, his hand shot up in the air. I can't pray with you. I could pray for you, but I can't pray with you. How could I? You're not a Christian. And so I left. And I made the long walk down that empty corridor back to the elevators, feeling so dejected and angry and sad and wondering what the hell was I thinking in tackling this chaplaincy thing in the first place. This was a big mistake. Definitely an outsider. And there's Gary, alone in his room, having his own spiritual crisis of the vertical variety. The Lord chose not to heal him after all. What's more, he's alienated the one hand that was there in the darkness that could have reconnected him, yes, maybe only horizontally and maybe only for a moment. But still, there's something tragic in that to me. But it seems his attachment to his insider status as a Christian guaranteed his outsider status alone in his hospital room, waiting for a transplant 6 months overdue. Now, it might be tempting for some of us to judge Gary and his circumstances as somehow self-inflicted, as divisive, for some perhaps even as ridiculous. But before we do, I invite you to consider a time when your own faith collapsed. Maybe not the vertical variety, but how about the horizontal variety? What about our faith in our own abilities, our careers? What about our faith in our relationships, marriages, families, friends? Or what if, in the most fundamental way, our faith in the idea that if we do our best, work hard, take care of ourselves, be a good person, save our money, everything will be okay and we will be safe. Oh, how we pursue and crave and take comfort in safety, sanctuary, security. Maybe we're hardwired for it. Maybe it's instinct. I know some of us were certainly raised to believe that such a place even existed. But that is one of the unmet expectations I often see on the cancer side of the wall. I thought if I took care of myself, ate right, exercised, was a good person, I wouldn't get sick. I would be safe. In an effort to keep us safe, one of those admonitions we often heard, maybe even since childhood, was don't talk to strangers. Many of us were groomed, in fact, to be wary, distrusting, fearful, and with good reason, I suppose. Still, according to Lord Jonathan Sacks, the former chief rabbi in the UK, the Hebrew Bible commands us only once to love thy neighbor. It commands us 36 times to love the stranger. Hospitality to strangers is a core principle in most of the world's great religious traditions. And yet we only have to look as far as our own national conversation about immigration, or closer to home, I'm embarrassed to say, at my own behavior behind the wheel, making my daily crosstown commute, to see that we've largely tossed that one aside. While we're used to hearing the expression a complete stranger or a total stranger, I'm struck by the equally common expression perfect stranger, and by its unintended double meaning. Countless times in my life, I've encountered the perfect stranger, just the right person at the right moment, who shows up with the right kindness, the right wisdom, makes the right gesture, perhaps points me in a direction I never would have considered. Likewise, I've seen the impact of countless perfect strangers on the lives of folks living with cancer. It's an almost universal comment I hear about how shocked people are about who shows up for them and who doesn't once they have cancer. The best friend that I thought would be there no matter what, missing in action. But it's the woman down the street whom I barely know who shows up with a casserole, and she sets up a carpool schedule to get my kids to school when I'm going through my treatment. An academic medical institution like UCLA draws patients from all over, often with very rare diagnoses, seeking out the one oncologist who's researching the one drug that just might give me some hope. And things being as they are, those folks often find themselves in the same clinic, seeing the same doctor at the same time, getting the same treatment. Gladys and Darlene were two such folks. There's no reason on earth why these two ever should have been friends. Different age, different race, different economic, social, educational background, different political perspective, different religious perspective, and yet there they were, fighting for their lives with the same diagnosis. They found themselves in the same clinic on the same day and sat next to each other week in and week out, always talking. They grew quite close. When Gladys died, Darlene told me she grieved more deeply for her than she had even for her own sister. Perfect strangers had become family, rowing in the same lifeboat. So what is it that makes a stranger sometimes more perfect for us than a loved one, a family member, a good friend? For one thing, a stranger generally has no agenda for us. No need to fix us or correct us or contextualize our lives for us on our behalf. More often than not, they're completely indifferent to us. And yet in our bumping up against one another, sometimes there can be a gift, maybe a new awakening, a new awareness, maybe a reminder of an old one. A number of years ago, I had a breast cancer patient, Dorothy, whom I would visit regularly in the infusion clinic. Her husband, Frank, came with her to every single appointment. Frank was a good guy, but a bit of a grumpy Gus. He was kind of a curmudgeonly fellow. He did love to collect and restore antique and vintage cars. I listened to many stories about their cross-country trips to various car shows. One week, Frank was telling me what happened after the previous week's appointment. That week, he had chosen to drive one of his restored beauties to the clinic. When they went back out to the parking structure after Dorothy's infusion, he found the side of his car bashed in. Now, for any of you that have been in that situation, as I have, you know that deep feeling of disgust and outrage. And he makes his way closer to the car, and then he sees the note pinned under the windshield wiper. Name, address, phone number, insurance information, apology. I, for weeks, had been listening to Frank tell me how disenchanted he'd become with the human race. And here he was given this gift. Michael, I got to tell you, it was almost worth the hassle of getting my car fixed just to be reminded there's still good people in the world who do the right thing. Now, it was Frank's creative choice to find the meaning in that ordeal, but it was the stranger having done the right thing that provided the catalyst. Sometimes a stranger can be a sort of teacher. Several years ago, one of my colleagues asked me if I would go see Bruce in the hospital, who was dying of liver cancer. I only met Bruce the one time, and I only saw him through this narrow window of critical illness at the end of his life. Still, such a narrow opening can offer a surprisingly intimate view, particularly to the stranger. Bruce was one who had lived his life on a very big stage, one of enormous financial wealth, international travel, corporate boardrooms, the works. His world had now been diminished down to the size of this hospital room. Not having many friends or family about locally, his society had been distilled down to the doctors, nurses, and housekeeping staff who came in to tend to his room. Bruce also found himself at a kind of spiritual crossroads. He wanted to connect with the Methodist faith he dimly remembered from his youth, but he didn't know how. He wanted to pray, but he didn't know how or for what. It seemed kind of like a hollow, empty exercise at this point. So rather than launch into some lofty theological discussion, we started closer in. And I asked Bruce to consider the magic inherent in the smallest gestures of kindness, particularly from strangers, tender mercies, if you will. Oh, I know exactly what you mean, Michael. Just last night, I had the most amazing conversation with the woman who came in to clean my room. Now, if you met Bruce, you would never peg him as one to be having a conversation with the housekeeping staff. But life had changed. The world had changed. She was it in that moment. Michael, she had the sweetest smile, and she spoke with this kind of demeanor that just made me feel like it was all okay. She even gave me a gift. His eyes filled with tears when he pointed to the little plastic angel over there on the shelf. I knew he had been touched, that his heart had been opened up by the magic of just being seen, being witnessed, being received, by connecting. I, for one, put my faith in those kinds of connections, in that kind of connectedness. Not long ago, I was doing a speaking engagement, and afterward, a gentleman came up to me and said, "How is it possible for you to create these meaningful relationships with your patients? It must take a lot of time to build that kind of trust, I imagine, huh?" I thought for a moment and answered, "You know what? It really takes no time at all. Hearts are already broken wide open. The stakes are too high. Just doesn't make any sense to stand on ceremony." Much in the same way, we might have a very meaningful, even intimate conversation with a total stranger we meet while traveling, particularly to a very faraway place. There you both are, outside of your element, vulnerable. Just doesn't make any sense to stand behind those facades that we use at home. A couple years back, a dear friend of mine lost his elderly mother. I called him the day after she died just to check in and see how he was doing. Said, "The crazy thing is, Michael, everybody keeps waiting for me to fall apart. My husband, my friends, even me too, I guess. And of course I don't. But I am finding it strangers that get past my defenses in ways that those closest to me just cannot." Yeah, strangers can indeed penetrate our defenses. They can be the ones to scale that wall that would seem to separate us between those who have cancer and those who pretend that cancer doesn't affect them. But the thing is, being an insider in the Cancer Club is not a status to which anybody aspires. Nobody chooses to join that club. And yet, being an insider in the Cancer Club also offers the opportunity for deep connection, kinship, communion, only possible because of cancer. I see it all the time. I see it every month in the Circle of Reflection that I facilitate here at the Sims Mann Center. I certainly saw it between Gladys and Darlene. But the thing is, being an insider in the Cancer Club almost guarantees that one will be marked as an outsider in the normal world, a world that spends a lot of time and energy trying to pretend like we don't know anything about the realities of cancer. So, what, if anything, does that outsider perspective offer us? Jane Wagner, who wrote and created all of Lily Tomlin's brilliant material and characters all those years ago, once posited through her character, Trudy, the bag lady, after all, what is reality anyway? Nothing but a collective hunch. Being in the outsider position gives us the opportunity to step outside of that collective hunch we call reality. As we move or are moved into that outsider position, it may be the only opportunity we ever have to truly reevaluate and assess everything we have ever held to be true and dear and sacred. In the Native American tradition, there's a concept of the two-spirited being. One is seen as having both a male and female in the same body. Somebody we might call a gay or transgender. But the two-spirited being is not some marginalized outcast. They are often elevated in the tribe. They're seen as shamans or healers, seen as having a gift of vision and perspective that is not limited to one narrow gender or another. Much in the same way that a cancer patient has a vision from both sides of the wall. Well, all that wisdom and insight is wonderful, isn't it? But it's also painful and lonely. And by contrast, to feel that I belong to my place in the world, my community, my work, my family, or in a vertical sense that I'm held lovingly in the embrace of God's love, well, that's as warm and cozy as a big comfy chair by the fire. Who wouldn't want that feeling all the time? But from what I observe, not too many of us are given the opportunity to sit by the fire forever. So I would ask myself, can I move with a little more grace and hold the tension between the warmth of the fire and the cold wind outside, even when life beckons me back inside, only to show me the door a few moments later? Might I even catch a glimpse of a larger truth, that this whole notion of insiders and outsiders is an illusion? That both the warmth of the fire and the cold wind outside are illusions of separation, that there really exists anything at all in the universe other than the oneness of all life. Might I even discover a knowingness deep in my bones, as the poet David White says in his exquisite poem, The House of Belonging, I belong to that aloneness as I belong to my life. So much of all this might just be a story that we're making up about ourselves and each other, who's inside, who's out, changeable as the wind moment to moment. Because there I was 11 years ago at that cotillion, feeling so less than in my khaki pants, feeling like the loser of the world, having been laid off from my job, absolutely betrayed and battered by the voters of California, feeling like I'm 11 and I'm 54 in the same moment, and actually catching myself thinking, damn, if I just had a suit, everything would be okay. And then 3 days after the cotillion, I get this note from Shoshana. Dear Michael, thank you for dancing with me at the cotillion. I really loved your colorful tie. I hope that you enjoyed yourself. I also loved your brown and tan suit. See you soon. A number of years ago, I saw an interview on TV between Bill Moyers and Pema Chodron, the well-known Buddhist author and teacher. They were talking about New York after 9/11. And Bill was commenting on how New Yorkers after 9/11 weren't behaving like New Yorkers at all. They were really watching out for each other, tending to each other with care. And slowly, as life got back to normal, they started acting like New Yorkers again, kind of minding their own business. Pema suggested that's because after 9/11, New Yorkers really understood in a bone-deep way the groundless nature of life, that there is nothing to hold on to. And when we really grasp the groundlessness of life, she said, the only response that makes any sense at all is kindness to each other and to ourselves. It is so deceptively simple. It's such a wildly undervalued virtue, kindness. And yet I believe that it offers us the pathway to being that perfect stranger. And in keeping our eyes and hearts open with some gratitude for the kindness shown to us, we get to experience the magic of so many perfect strangers in our midst. thinking back on that very bittersweet experience at that cotillion 11 years ago, that painful dance between being an insider and an outsider, it's easy to think, well, Michael, that was all in your head. That was self-imposed. While cancer, on the other hand, that's real. And the wall that separates those with cancer in that illusory world that thinks it's cancer-free, that is also real. But I wonder if that's necessarily true. I wonder if that apparent gulf that seems to separate these worlds can indeed be bridged from both sides. Perhaps by a willingness and an intention to embrace the groundless nature of life, knowing that there is nothing to hold on to, moving into a deeper awareness that no one gets out of here alive, no matter how much we still don't quite believe it. And likewise, with an intention and willingness to embrace the vulnerability that we share as human beings, a vulnerability that also offers us the magic of deep connection, kinship, communion, often only possible because of our wounds. And perhaps by just keeping our hearts and eyes open for all those perfect strangers in our midst. But ultimately, maybe by just making the choice for kindness to others, to ourselves, to every part of ourselves. Maybe each of us can be the one to scale those walls that would seem to separate us. Maybe even tear them down altogether. We'll just have to see. May it be so. Thank you. So we've got some time for questions, comments, reflections. Those are 3 or 4 distinct questions. Hard, yeah.
And is that person in the room?
Are you in show business? 2 down, Dorothy Kilgallen. One of the most painful cases that's kind of a cautionary tale to me was 10 or 12 years ago. It was a palliative care chaplain, a woman I went in to introduce myself, and I said, just, tell me about your life. And she said, my life has been a colossal waste of time. She was in her 70s, and I said, why would you say that? And she said, because I did all the wrong things. I married the wrong person. I stayed married for the wrong reasons. I did the wrong job, and now it's too late to do anything over. And not that it challenged me as a chaplain how to respond, because then we can talk about that some more, but the weight of that, it was done without any kind of maudlin what we might call self-pity kind of thing. It was just the facts. It was just, that's how it is. And the bleakness of that, initially it was kind of like, oh, please, God, don't let that be me when I'm taking my last breath. That comes to mind.
Did you think that she was implicitly asking you for some relief from that bleak evaluation?
I don't think so. I think she just wanted to be heard, and I knew it would be a mistake, and it wouldn't have been my inclination, oh, now don't say that. I'm sure there's plenty of things that you did, to try to correct her experience of her life, which is not my role, and I don't think anybody likes that. First, you got to hear this is her truth and this is the reality. Maybe then, if there's more time, which I didn't have, we could tease apart, that, even though that was painful as hell, that really did make me a bigger person or smarter or something, that it hurts. Yeah. So it's hard to come to peace with we had a talk, today was our Circle of Reflection Day, and I always pass out quotes, and then we read them aloud and say, which ones do you like, which ones sort of piss you off, and on a particular subject. And there's this quote by Joseph Campbell that I'm going to butcher, but he says something to the effect of, life is sorrowful, it just is. And the trick of life is to participate with joy in the sorrows of the world. And he goes on to say that, and there's one guy who comes to the group who takes such issue with that quote, and it's not sorrowful, it's joyful, but it has shit in it. And I understand that perspective too. But some of doing this work, I kind of have to start at the ground place of, it's just sorrowful, it's sad. Unfair crap happens, people suffer, they die. It doesn't make any sense. To try to imply that I could make sense of it or you should make sense of it keeps me from just being connected with them in that moment to say it's sorrowful. And he goes on to say something like, we transcend the world of joy and fulfillment and achievement when we can do that, when we can re-engage and participate with joy in the sorrows of the world. That sounds paradoxical, but to me that's about as deeply true statement as can be. How can I participate with joy in the sorrows of the world? Yes, it's a tragic situation, but in this moment, I sure love having this conversation. I love the way your eyes light up when you talk about your dog. Whatever the thing is. Other thoughts? Yes?
Could you share more about the Circle of Reflection, what that program is?
That is a group that I facilitate once a month at the Simsman Center. It's on the third Tuesday of every month from 1 to 2:30. And every month we have a different theme for reflection. Today was creating a personal sense of the sacred and the holidays and cancer. I find this time of year it's awfully hard when you're dealing with something like cancer and the whole world is screaming at you to be grateful and celebrate and enjoy and tra-la and buy more stuff. But we often talk about things like forgiveness or living with doubt, or we've even done a group on this topic, being an insider and an outsider. So all comers are welcome, and anybody touched by cancer is welcome to come. We have bereaved people in the group, people that are in treatment, people out of treatment, caretakers for ones who are in treatment. So, yeah.
Is that here in Westwood?
It's here in Westwood, yep, at the Simsman Center in the 200 Medical Building. Any other thoughts? Yes, Chris.
Well, so what advice would you have for someone who may have a friend dealing with cancer? What kinds of things can you say, or is it better just to listen? And I don't understand people that just leave the relationship if they're a loved one or a friend that can't deal with it. I'm sure it comes from their own fear of
Yeah.
death or cancer or whatever, but what advice would you give as a chaplain, to
That's such a wonderful question, and I almost wanted to ask Dale earlier when you had said, people say the stupidest things. What's the stupidest thing anybody said to you? I mean,
Oh, I can tell you, I had a cousin who had breast cancer. Okay?
yeah.
I had ovarian cancer. She called me up to tell me about everybody she knew that had ever died from ovarian cancer. Pretty stupid, huh?
Yeah, thanks. Was that your helpful speech? Yeah. The three magic words for me as a chaplain are tell me more. Keep your mouth shut and tell me more. And my colleague here has an expression, Lorelei, radical curiosity. That's something we can all have. How'd you come to feel that way? What is the worst thing to do is to try to correct somebody's feelings, tell them how they should look at it. Well, look at all you've got to be grateful for. At least it, didn't take your kids. At least you lived 60 years, or whatever the thing is. First, be willing to hear the answer. Tell me more. And that answer might be, my life has been a colossal waste of time. And to just receive that and not say anything. And if you stay silent long enough, somebody's going to talk. And it's really hard. It sounds simple. It is not. It is not. I have had challenging patients who have brain cancer that you can't really have a conversation with because they're so compromised, and yet you're spending time together. So it's a lot of just holding the space, smiling, maybe meditating. We try to listen and try to get the gist of it. It becomes like a little game of charades. But
touch and acknowledging their situation. Okay? Yes, they're dying, so we avoid the subject, or when people try to say, oh no, like you said, oh no, you're going to be okay, you're going to be fine.
some people don't want to talk about their dying if they're dying, and that's something that you can kind of feel out. You might say, would you like to talk about it? And they may know what it means. They don't. Well, what do you mean? How are you feeling about the future? The future might be, I don't know what I'm going to do for breakfast tomorrow because I'm out of milk. The future might be, I'm worried I'm not going to get into heaven. Let them guide the conversation. But if you're sensing that somebody wants to talk about their dying, I've had patients go to their death never talking about it, never wanting to, never talking about anything more deep than what they did the weekend before. And I have to respect that as a choice too. It can't be my judgment about what a good death or a conscious death looks like. Everybody's got to figure it out on their own. Yes, Eddie?
Do you advise family members or friends of people that you are caring for as a chaplain things that they ought to or ought not to say, or approaches they should take or not, or do you just leave that to them and deal directly and solely with the patient?
If they ask me, I don't know what to say to him, I don't know what to do, then that's a time to have that conversation. A lot of my work, because we're in the outpatient setting here, a lot of it's in an infusion clinic where there's zero privacy. There's an infusion chair and another one 3 feet over, so not terribly private. And if somebody's saying something that doesn't feel appropriate, you can't really say, now, don't talk that way. You know what he'd really like to hear is, you just try to hold the space, maybe breathe a little, maybe touch somebody on the shoulder if they're getting heated and kind of rub their back. And sounds like there's still a lot of energy around this subject, you know. So it's all driven by what the patient kind of wants, how deeply they want to go and what they're looking for. And then you can maybe gently kind of hold the door open. I remember one patient I had for 6 years wanted to see me every week and never talked about anything more than what she did the weekend before. Feeling pretty good this week. Oh, it feels so good to see you every week. And I keep saying, you know, you want to talk about the future? Oh, well, you know, next week. And it just never came up. And that's how she chose to do it. And I have to respect that as a viable way. So it's not my place to come in and say, you know, you're doing that wrong. It's more of a question of listening for who's hurting in a group situation. I remember once the patient was a man, very kind of together, stoic kind of guy who knew the score, knew that he had a really bad diagnosis and wouldn't be long for the world, but I'm at peace with it, and blah, 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 blah. The wife is sitting there, she's a frantic mess. And we're in an infusion clinic. I said, and what's it like for you with this whole experience? And she, oh no, it's not about me. I've just got to be strong for him. Well, I knew she's falling apart inside. So I do then reach out to her. She might say yes, she might say no, give her a call, say, seems like you're pretty distressed. You want to come in and talk? You want to talk on the phone? And she never quite did. A few moments when he was in the hospital once, I got her on a bench sitting outside waiting for surgery. And anybody who's waited for anybody for surgery, you know what that drill is like. Anybody who could just plop themselves down and just kind of, so how about those Yankees? Whatever, to just, yeah. Baseball, Rick, see, I knew that.
It's the A's.
So, yeah, that. Yes, Sandy.
I have a friend who I'm not very close to, but I've known her for support, or does it bother me more to have it?
As long as you, well, I have two kind of responses to that. One is in this culture, nobody wants to ask for help. That is seen as somehow I'm weak and I'm petty and I'm small, and no, I don't want to put you out. I mean, 99% of the patients I see, I'm a caretaker, I'm the giver, I don't like receiving all of this stuff. So nobody's going to ask for help. I remember when I was working on the bone marrow transplant floor, I mean, everybody is seriously ill and they're in the hospital for a long time. You go in and say, how's it going today? I'm great. How can you be great? This is, look at what you're up against. But the expected response is great. And I have patients today that, oh, no, thanks, I'm fine. And I'll say, you know what, you can call me and I'm here. And no. But when I find them maybe in the infusion clinic and we sit down and have a conversation, oh, that felt so good. So it's kind of like showing up, but knowing that it's okay if they say, today's not a good day. Give them absolute permission. If you're willing to drive out to the nursing home and have them say no, at least you also gave them an experience to exercise some authority. If they're particularly in a nursing home or in a hospital, they've got no authority about who comes in and goes out of their room. As a chaplain, I'm one person that they could say, get out of here, and I leave. And that's empowering. If I don't take it personally, it's empowering to them. Oh, look, they leave. I can still control that part of my environment. So if you can offer your friend that kind of, you know, I was in the neighborhood. I know you said don't call, but I've just been thinking about you. Would you like to talk? I brought some cookies, whatever the thing is. And they might say yes or and might say no. But I think showing up is everything.
I think it's because I personalize it, and I just want the person to know that I'm there if they want very okay with her saying, call me. And I will try it again and see how she responds.
And I think you can trust that, but you also know that for some people, they are never going to call and ask you, would you please come?
Yes.
I don't want to put you out. Oh no, I'm really fine. You know, gasp, gasp. I can't breathe, but I'm okay. So you show up and don't say anything. Just, you know, I brought a book to read. Is it okay if I just hang out here for a while? And I don't take it for granted. I mean, be able to call Scott, my husband, in public on a videotape that's going to go around the world is a radical act. And it's still a radical act. That's changed. I also, and I'm going to cry, but thanks to the SimsMed Center and my work here, I was devastated when I was hired here from having been laid off from that job, and I had another job that was created for me, and then the door was slammed in my face that I really, really wanted. So I already felt kind of whipped, and I was, how old was I then? I mean, 65, I was, 55 years old. This isn't the time to go back to graduate school and become a lawyer. I was devastated, and at this center, I feel like I've kind of been given fertile ground to do what I do and give my gift and discover new gifts and nurture other people with their gifts. And when I look back on that day, and it's almost a year to the day, 11 years to the day of that cotillion, it's a, thank you God, if there is one. That whole journey has been so, some of the people in this room who I've been able to bond with, it's everything. When I'm breathing my last breath, it's going to be, thank you for that opportunity. I never want to retire or stop doing this. Why would I? This makes my life on purpose. So that's how things have changed in 11 years. Do I still have those moments of feeling like, ooh, I don't belong here and I'm not enough and I don't drive a nice enough car? All the time. All the time. But it doesn't grab me by the throat so much and hold me down. I can kind of bounce back a little bit and say, hey, yeah, look at this. There'd be times when I'd be driving home from work down Sunset Boulevard and see some 35-year-old in a big shiny Mercedes on the phone or something, and with the hair, and he's got hair and he's handsome and he's 35 and he's done everything right and I did everything wrong in my 13-year-old beat up Prius, and I can go really down a hole with that. Now I kind of go, what an asshole. And that's really loving too, in a loving way. But I'm just saying, I don't get sucked down as much. Other thoughts, reflections? Yeah.
Michael, could you talk a little bit about, thoughts on when you feel like the outsider is yourself, and you don't recognize yourself, you don't even know who you are, you can't even accept your own kindness?
Yeah, that's a super painful place to be. And I have been there. I haven't been there in a while. Doesn't mean I won't be there tomorrow. But that you really say that so eloquently. When you don't recognize yourself, and to me, like in Jungian psychological terms, that's kind of like your shadow is coming forward, and I don't want to own any of it. Where did all that come from? Look at all this anger and jealousy and rage. I'm the smallest person. I'm the biggest asshole in the world. And that can grab me by the throat. But I come back to what my colleague Lorelei says. The solution simply is curiosity, to stay with it and say, and I think Pema Chodron would probably say the same thing, to really go, isn't that interesting? To be more fascinated than fearful about it, rather than try to go, oh no, that wasn't me. That was just some aberration. Go, wow, look at that jealousy. What kind of a person am I? Then I can grow from it. And I don't have to be afraid of it anymore. It's not running the show anymore because I'm not running away from it. It's just, oh yeah, that's there too. That angry part, that part that isn't grateful, that's so kind of petty and small and can't be nice to Scott when he's so nice to me. And all of that stuff, that's there too. Can I just... Sometimes relationships then have to come and go. There's some people in this room that have been in relationship with me for over 40 years, and that is the greatest. And they've seen all those aspects of me, and they're still here, and that's great. And there's other people that have certainly come and gone and couldn't adapt. Or maybe I couldn't adapt, or we grew in different directions, or outgrew each other. So I think we have to be fluid too, and we can't cling to anything. I mean, like the Buddhists say, we think, oh, I'll die without that person. I mean, everybody remember the first time their heart was broken? I mean, nobody will ever love me again. We live to tell about it. But at the time, it's as real can be. So can we just be in it when we're there without the need to escape? Any other thoughts, reflections? Well, I love you guys all for showing up. Thank you so much, and for all the nice comments.